Vukosi Marivate, or should I say Dr. Vukosi Marivate, you forgot to tell me that I needed to bring a urine sample and a blood sample, because flippin' heck, that's all they didn't ask for at the entrance there, man. The security is hectic up in here.
Yeah, we have a lot of different units at the CSIR, and some of the things that people work on here is either top secret, classified, and at the same time, I think parts of the CSIR is like a national key point, so people have to be authenticated. We need to know who they are. So yeah, normally it's just your ID, not any. If somebody did ask you for bodily fluids,
So no. So
I can ask them what they were doing.
So I'm kidding. Everyone listening to this, guys, you don't need to bring a vial of something in your car when you come visit. But man, better have some ID and come early if you've got an appointment, because clearly they're not going to let you in jail.
Yep, that's true.
So yeah, I'm walking up the stairs to your office. Firstly, the campus is beautiful. It really feels like a university campus I grew up on in the Philippines when I was much younger. So green and it's kind of layered and all. So it just feels like there's a lot happening. It just feels like right? I haven't been inside any of the buildings or anything. I'm just driving around, and it feels like a lot of smart people solving a lot of important things. And then I meet you outside, you bring me inside, and you're pointing to that building over there across from you guys here. Apparently there's like stuff to do with home affairs and just give me a sense, give a sense to someone listening to this, what the vibe is when you drive onto this campus, what you see, the sights and sounds. No one seems to really know what the CSIR does, actually.
Yeah, so the CSIR is a research organization, so it's a government lab, basically, made up of different units and groups in here who work on different problems. The Pretoria campus, where we are right now, is the largest campus in the country. There's campuses in Durban, in Cape Town, in Stellenbosch. I used to work when I started, actually, in the one in Joburg, in Emerentia. The CSIR's main mandate is to do research that's applied to improve the lives of South Africans. Where we are right now, in terms of my office, it's in a unit. There's like a couple of units at the CSIR. This unit is called Modeling and Digital Science, and given that word, we do a wide array of things that's basically doing some kind of at the end, you're modeling. So we have three major areas: information security, which is kind of why you're here, advanced mathematical modeling, and intelligent autonomous systems, which is MIAS, which is actually robotics. So the building you're in is split up into that. You're on the side that's mostly information security, which is kind of network and data security, and biometrics. So the biometrics guys actually work with Home Affairs, and they help come up with the spec for the current smart cards. In the information security, we also have a group here which works on data science research and machine learning research, and also applications of data science to government problems.
And so I'm here, as you alluded to, because of information security. We had this conversation. In fact, in last week's episode of the African Tech Roundup, we covered the fact that Russia basically shut down LinkedIn for not abiding by their laws regarding having Russian citizen information or personal information hosted on Russian servers. They shut that down. I guess they started with LinkedIn because they're pretty much a runt as far as social media platforms are concerned. I have a feeling they're coming for the likes of Facebook and others. But then I put out there, I'm not so sure. I haven't really applied my mind to thinking about whether this is an overreach, and as far as Russia, flexing its sovereignty or not. You reached out on social media and were like, well, you're not so sure it's an overreach in the context of, the European Union, members in the European Union doing something similar. You sent me an article, which was fantastic. One I can definitely recommend. We shared it on our Twitter. If you want to check it out, at African Roundup, just find it there. A Computer World UK article that enlightened me to the extent to which EU partners are going to protect the data, well, quote unquote, we'll talk about this, quote unquote, protect the data of their citizens. So in your mind, it's only fair that Russia does the same.
So it's not about defending country or not. So especially where you are right now, we look at information security from the side of a citizen. Right, you can look at information security from the side of the government, and that's kind of different. For us, we have our colleagues who work on the other side of the hill at the defense part, who might look at information security from the side of government or kind of law enforcement. So when you're doing that, you kind of have to start thinking, if you have your personal information and you share it with somebody, how does the government make sure that it has policies that it protects individuals. So let me give us a simple example. When I was studying for my PhD in the US, because I was living in the US, and I would sign up for services like my cell phone contract, for example, and I was with a specific network there, and their systems got breached. Because of the laws that apply to the United States and that company being there, they had to either find ways to compensate me if there was actually going to be any losses that I suffered, and to also try to figure out how to protect me. So a lot of times breaches happen. If you hadn't noticed before, in America, people get free personal information protection. There's companies that do that type of stuff. And that kind of response from companies is only available if your local laws actually apply to them. So now if I think about South Africa, for example, and your information got breached for whatever service that you're using, and that service is actually based either in Europe or in the US, you don't really have recourse.
You've done an excellent job of not taking sides in the matter, but also just pragmatically showing why it might benefit a citizen of any country that their government shows initiative in trying to protect their data security. I suppose it's difficult to discuss these issues without, global politics filtering into the matter. And of course, this is Russia we're talking about, and perhaps not, Sweden or Norway or some country that we don't associate with like a politically heavy presence in global politics and that kind of thing. But let's put that aside because I like the train of thought you're giving us. So let's assume Russia follows through, and it's clear that they have the intent to follow through on this mandate to see that this law is abided by. They insist that any foreign company that has Russian citizens on their database host that content on Russian servers. What is the implication from a safety point of view outside of, a recourse if there's a breach? What benefits are there to a citizen? What benefits are there, say, to the country as a whole?
Again, I'm going to use a South African example. Within this. So we just had the Protection of Personal Information Act be signed into law by President Jacob Zuma, and it's got specific things about what should happen in the data that you collect, and how you should, you are responsible for securing it as a company, and you should collect only the things that you need to collect and nothing more, kind of thing. So if something were to happen that contravenes that, for me as a South African, I wouldn't be able to go to these multinationals and say, hey, you contravened this act in South Africa. Can you please fix it? And maybe another analogous thing would be what happened when it came to kind of online shops. Remember before, you didn't get VAT charged. And then, legislation passed that said digital goods, because of the pull of hey, we can do business in South Africa or some of the other African countries, we will make sure that VAT is added on there. It's the same kind of thing. People will abide to it as per when they see that they might actually lose out on the market. And for a lot of the African continent, there's a lot of users on these platforms. And why aren't we then working towards actually having a discussion, which is something where I have not yet seen, even within government in South Africa, to discuss how you bring in and say, hey, make sure the data is locally there, so that we can then actually, if there's local laws, those actually apply to you. Because if we know there's been breaches, and every time they're announced, we look at them and we think they don't affect us, but they actually do, we would want to make sure that our citizens are protected. On the other side, which is the flip coin, the flip of the coin of this, is we could look at a country like China, where a company like Google decided to pull out. So if we're saying that maybe a government like Russia could go too far, but you had Google pulling out of China for the reasons where it was like, okay, it's fine that you want to have local restrictions, but the restrictions go further than what we as a company, being Google, are willing to go, and would rather completely cut off the relationship.
And I think when it comes to Russia and the specific case that we discussed last week, I think that's the automatic assumption that the only reason a government might go in this direction is because they want access to that information when they want it or need it, or they want to be in a position to put pressure on any given company with a database of people they want to access. They want to be able to have access to it at any given time. But it's not I suppose it's not fair to assume that's the case, because you've already made a decent case for why it's in the best interest of the citizen. That said, I do sense that governments around the world, particularly in developing nations, particularly on the continent, I think governments are around this LTE and 4G wave and this debate around licenses and dispersing them. In South Africa, the white paper, the ICT white paper, and etc. I think governments are beginning to realize that they missed the boat, maybe on some level, in terms of participating in the growth of mobile, which really has been the most. I think the mobile telcos on the continent now possess arguably the most valuable data sets on the continent, and governments are on the outside of that to some extent, with no paperwork that allows them or holds these people to account perhaps to the extent that we should. And I suppose Poppy, in the context of this law that has come through in South Africa, is a start. But I do imagine, now I'm putting on the hat of thinking for government and being, sympathetic to their cause. If I was government and I wanted some sort of control, even from a national security point of view, this is a conversation we should be having, surely.
So earlier this week, I was in Kenya and in Nairobi for the AfriChai conference. I was specifically there for a workshop on ethics in social media research. So one of the things we're looking at right now is something that might be kind of open data, kind of for data science, and doing a lot of analysis. That's what we do here with my team, is the social media data, because a lot of it is through open APIs. But at the same time, we have to discuss what are the ethics and the things we should be following in order to not do harm, and also protect the individuals who are within there. Because most of our analysis, we're looking at the group, the population. We're not actually looking at you. But at the same time, you can think about it and say, well, on the other side of this thing, you can do mass kind of surveillance. So now if we take social media to its limit, you've got the mobile telcos, because they've got all of this data. Some of them, it's also, they also have access to payment systems where they know where there's mobile money and all those things. And that's a lot of information about people.
Pretty much the only thing they don't have is your blood sample.
They have a lot of that. And there again, yes, you are hoping that the discussion within government, it's about how do we put together legislation that allows them to operate freely, meaning that the innovation continues and all that stuff, but then make sure that citizens also are protected from any unscrupulous behavior that might happen. Because I don't think things always start because somebody had bad intentions. Somebody might go and say, we want to build this new service. It's going to be great for why reason. But then 5 years down the line, it's being completely misused by some other people within that company. And then that's when the thing leaks out and everybody feels like, oh, that's evil and all those things. But there must be ways that when those type of things happen, that we can go back and say, how do we fix this? And at the same time, you must make sure that the companies themselves go through procedures that actually secure. So it's the same thing as in South Africa, phone numbers. Like one of the things that we hope Poppy will sort out is, I don't know how many calls I've gotten today from unsolicited, from people selling me stuff. All right. And I will talk to MTN, who's my service provider, and say, please remove me for all of your lists or whatever it is. Every time somebody calls me, I say, but it never stops. I believe some of it is coming from the network operators. It's not just.
It's definitely a revenue stream for them.
You see, exactly. And now it's a question of, fine, you can make money out of this, but does the user even know? Really, it's fine if you say it's in the fine print, but do they understand that you're saying you're going to sell their personal information to third parties? And if we were to go outside CSIR and stop by the traffic light and ask 10 people who are just walking past, I'm pretty sure none of them will say they understand that that's actually what was going on when they signed up for a service.
Sure. So help me understand, practically the implications of, say, African nations following the footsteps of what European nations have decided to do and what Russia is clearly deciding to enforce in their country. If we were to attempt to go toe-to-toe with that, what would be some of the unexpected practical implications on day-to-day life, maybe from a startup aspect, in terms of the complexity of just starting something that needs to adhere to government principle or government laws? Would it have a knock-on effect on the attractiveness of this market as a destination for multinationals who are looking to do business here? What sort of things, pain maybe early on in the short term, might we expect if Africa goes in this direction as well?
So I can't speak as from the law perspective. I'm not a lawyer. And then two, also the other one might be public policy. I think those type of people might be better suited for this. I can take a stab at it as saying that one, it might be very interesting to see, like, you hope somebody like the AU would be the ones leading of saying, let's standardize the terms across the continent. Because if we do that, it's easier. People like, companies coming from outside don't need to deal with localization, local different variations of this thing. And they'll just say, yeah, we know that we're dealing with
a block.
African states, and this is how they deal with things. And that's why I think also the EU went in as a block to say, these are the laws about personal information. And so as a block, because you just need to look at that one legislation and then you know how to move forward. There might be ramifications for companies that store the data outside the country and might also be using that loophole of saying the person signs up for the service. We tell them that the data is going to be stored in a server in the US. And as such, we absolve ourselves from any responsibilities to local laws because we don't store anything on a South African server.
Okay, so now you've actually answered a question I had in my head as you were speaking. I was like, what is the biggest motivating factor for companies not to, aside from the cost, of course, it must be just a mission just to have servers all over the world. But aside from the cost, why wouldn't companies be doing this anyway? And you've started to answer that question.
Yeah, you could have. I don't want to say that's exactly what might be, because I would have to go in through legislation and say, does it absolve you? Some might say, as long as a company's headquartered here, it doesn't matter where the data is. You still abide by local law. But some places you might find that that's the case. I'm saying other countries on the continent, you might find that's the case, that it absolves you of the data your security responsibility, because you're saying, I don't store anything on here, or it's stored on Amazon, and I shouldn't worry too much about it. You have to be very careful about that. Also on the side, I think as an entrepreneur, if you're building something, because it might just be a matter of time that something then does come in, and if you didn't follow proper procedure, you still might get bitten.
I'm actually trying to think of a startup concept that wouldn't require some form of database storage of personal information. I'm having a hard time thinking of a startup concept that wouldn't involve that.
And that's exactly the case, right? That it's the norm now that you're going to be collecting some information. I had a very tough time in the morning today. I'm going to trying to connect to one of the free internet hotspots today. And they had a thing where initially I just used to be able to just connect with my email, and I have an email that I just use for things like hotspots that don't identify me further on. And then now they put in a requirement that they want the phone number to do that. And it was very, I looked at it, it was very clever. They ask you for the phone number and say they're going to send you a text to do authentication, but they actually don't. So just by saying go through, it then says, yeah, you're fine, you're going through. But then you can see that's a little trick.
Yeah, a ferry definitely died now this morning, clearly.
You see? Yeah, it's a little trick to get your personal information, which means they're probably using it, as I said, as a revenue stream. Within there. So that type of stuff is like, okay, fine, you take my information. If you do, have you secured it well enough? Because a lot of the times we're hearing Yahoo got hacked. And how did it get hacked? You find out that there was a shortcut that somebody took at one time, and it can't be just an oops anymore.
Goodness, and I mean, and to be fair, I mean, we talk a lot about IoT and the massive potential risk it is as the world continues to surf this trend and everything. But we're not even getting the basics right, bruh.
Yeah, no, we look at IoT. We've had lots of discussions here with the rest of our the team. There's we have our pen testers, our hackers who work here, and we've had discussions about that of saying it's very odd. I was. When IoT was becoming a thing, I was doing my PhD in machine learning, but in the lab, we were working on Wi-Fi connected devices before they became now you have lots of standards way before then. And one of the things that you could see was okay, are we going to be interoperable? 2, you're going to have servers that are just sending stuff to houses and then houses are replying. And then once you start going through that, you're going hey, if somebody then hacks my coffee maker, my whole network is inside my house is now vulnerable, right? But then that is again levels of abstractions way further than again the simple, you ask for my email address, you ask for my phone number. Some people are going to take your ID numbers, your passport numbers. Some people are going to take your address, where you stay, and all those things. and they're going to put it somewhere. And when they get breached, you would like to know. Two, you would also like, as I said, like you also would like to know that they should communicate to you what they're going to do with that data very clearly at the beginning. Right, instead of being like, fine, the terms and conditions that nobody reads, but you could change it and you could pass legislation that says anything that has to touch with A, B, C, D, E must be explained in very basic language and must be prominent when somebody's signing up for the service. Like that would change a lot of, and like whatever color coded, saying that if it's like the most risky type of personal information, it must be in red in bold. Right, and then anything else can be orange, and then if it's very unlikely, it might just be your first name. They don't take your surname. Maybe that's green, like because that piece of information by itself, if it were to go away, it might not really identify you. But then if you put all these things together, it's such a big risk if it actually gets stolen.
I just got a chill as you were speaking because I'm realizing. I mean, we've recently just covered how the mobile networks are rolling out these big IoT networks. They're investing heavily in that area. You've got private companies doing the same, and they're selling this huge big thing. They'll be selling into the security industry, the logistics industry, and we don't have laws protecting us on a basic level. Well, I mean, in the case of Poppy, at least it's a start, as far as South Africa is concerned. But really, continent-wide, they're gonna know where. Your kettle that's linked to, or the brick in your house is gonna be linked to data that's totally hackable and saleable and potential and leaves you open for. And so I'm beginning to see for myself now, as an enthusiast in the space, like the scale of the risk here. It really is huge, isn't it?
So, like one of the things I should say. I'm a kind of machine learning researcher. I'm in data science. I love having data. Like that's something like people might say like, hey, I'm bashing the area, and data is useful and it could be used for all these other things. It could unlock so many new industries. It can. Right? My day to day is I have to deal with social media data. I deal with also personal information data that comes from places where I have to make sure it's secure. We have to have policies about how we manage our data here. When we get it, some might come from municipalities, some of it comes from private companies saying, we're looking at this, we're trying to solve X, can you help us? Right? Some come from government departments, but we have to go through internal procedures to make sure that I'm not going to be tomorrow going back to a government department and saying, oh yeah, somebody got in and took our stuff. So I love having data because that's what I do. I'm talking about information security here because we've had to think about this even when we're doing our machine learning work. Like to say, how are we going to make sure that we don't expose people? But then, now when you start going in and saying, okay, there's this thing, IoT, it's a bit of a wild, wild west at the moment. And that other week where the whole, half the internet in the US went down and they found out it was a, distributed attack using IoT devices, we kind of saw that coming. It wasn't,
And wasn't mentioned nearly as much is all the personal data that was linked to that attack. It was almost, in fact, it hasn't been covered at all. So we haven't even started to consider the knock-on effect in as far as exposure. Yeah. To as far as personal data is concerned. We really just talked about the fact that the internet went down.
Yeah, there are a lot of people just looked at that. People aren't going like, hey, did the account information that's connected with the service, because you might have signed up with whatever service provider for your IoT device.
Whose cameras did they hack? To which traffic did they draw?
It's not even that. I know, like a couple of years ago, there used to be a website that published with these Wi-Fi cameras, their IP addresses, because a lot of the manufacturers were just opening up as soon as you connected to your network, it would broadcast and say, I'm here. And then, so there was a website, I think it was a security mining website, where they were just showing how bad this is. And you could just randomly go onto a IP and see the person's house.
That's insane right there. You know what? This man has a meeting a few minutes away, and I don't want to keep you from that meeting. There is no way we're not going to have to chat again, because, I mean, you've raised so many issues. My mind is bursting. I probably sound partially incoherent to our listeners, usually. So that's because my mind is just racing because of some of the stuff you've raised, and we have to have this conversation again.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Man, so, ladies and gentlemen, it is Dr. Vukosi Marivate, and it is Doctor to you. Shout out to being a Fulbright scholar, bro.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, man. So the PhD is in data science?
In computer science, but with the focus I was in machine learning.
All right, man. Well, only the best for this show. Thank you so much for being here, bro.
Thank you.